Stay tuned to find out what my favourite moments were from this book, 3 reasons why you should pick it up and give it a chance, and why it's going to completely change the way you think about the natural world. Welcome to Green Pages. I'm Rebecca, and I've just finished reading Feral, Rewilding the Land, Sea and Human Life by George Monbiot. So who's it for? Anyone really interested in the concept of rewilding. If you're interested in conservation projects, rewilding is really, I like to think of it as the next step. So anyone interested in that concept, this is a great foundation and beginning for it. It's really also for anyone that has a sense of wild or adventure about them, as George is particularly adventurous and has some really interesting stories and concepts to share in the book. I'd say it's also for anybody that loves nature and just wants a deeper understanding of natural landscapes. What were the key takeaways for me? Well, the first one was the process of what actually rewilding is. Conservation has typically looked to the past. It's typically thought about recreating ecosystems, rainforests, coral reefs, whereas rewilding very much looks to the future. It looks at a particular landscape and the missing species from that ecosystem, reintroduces them, and then lets nature take care of itself from there. So that was one of the key takeaways for me, that it's not an outcome, it's a process. And the less we try and control and manage the natural landscapes, once we've reintroduced those missing species, the better. The other key takeaway for me was what a tropic cascade is and how it works. So typically we've got a pyramid with the top predator and the prey underneath. The tropic cascade makes us realize the complexities of ecosystems. So not only has that top predator going to affect the prey numbers underneath it, but it actually has a direct impact. It has an impact on a lot of other species that has no direct connection to. So, for example, if you introduce wolves in Yellowstone National Park, that actually didn't only affect the number of deer, it also affected the flow of the rivers, the erosion rates, it affected the atmosphere, it affected the trees. It affects far more than just what we think the direct related prey. So tropic cascade was a really interesting concept in which George explores in his book. My favourite moments from the book was the story about the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone, and just what the complexity of that ecosystem and it almost the impact it had that they just didn't foresee at all, particularly because national park managers had tried to cull the number of deer and manage that in the park, but it didn't have anywhere near the effect that the wolves did, because they hunted at different times of day. They would select different type of deer than what the national park managers would. They would make them run over into different areas where they would hunt them. So every single element had a different impact on actually what happened in that ecosystem. So that was a really interesting case study. I also really liked within this book the way George challenged the Wildlife Trust and nature reserves, particularly in Wales, which is where a lot of this book is focused on, because there is particular national parks in the Cumbrian Mountains which are called really wild, and actually upon looking, George was able to see that a lot of diversity and ecosystems are actually better and healthier on the highway of the actual national park, because there was the absence of things like sheep and cattle, which hadn't disrupted the ecosystem, which was all very ironic that the highway actually had better ecosystems as opposed to inside the national park itself. So George definitely challenges a lot of the laws, agricultural laws, as well as national park laws, that mean that we're very much managing natural landscapes, which is completely the opposite of the concept of rewilding. Why is it worth a read? Well, number one is it certainly makes you question closer to home, particularly because I'm living in the UK. We often look to, deforestation and disruption of coral reefs around the world in maybe more exotic locations. We don't tend to look so closer to home, whereas George really brought out to me that the backwards nature of the law and all sorts of things that are going on in the UK, where we really need to address that before looking out to other countries and maybe criticizing what they're doing in terms of their wild landscapes. The other thing is what natural landscapes should look like. I've been desperate to go and explore Snowdonia for a while now, and George really helped me to understand what a natural landscape actually should look like. A lot of the UK is very treeless, and a lot of the areas within Wales are very barren with lots of heath. So he helps you to understand what an actual natural landscape is, and why a lot of our understanding of what that should look like is distorted because of what it was previously wasn't natural either. So that was a really interesting thing. The two things it's really inspired me to do straight after this book is to look more into Slovenia, which is an incredible place to go and see because it's reforested, it's got a thriving ecosystem, beavers, wolves, all sorts, rivers flowing with fish. And that all came about because of political unrest and the invasion of the Nazis, which actually dispersed population and stopped farming, which allowed the area to rewild. And when he talks about it in the book, it really made me want to go and visit there. The other thing is I want to go and explore Rewilding Europe, which is a project which is seeking to, as it says, rewild areas across Europe. So I'm really interested to go and check that out. So would I recommend it to a friend? Absolutely. I really enjoyed reading this book, and George takes us on a couple of adventures that he goes on himself through, in between weaving through some of these concepts that I was really keen to understand. So yeah, really recommend it.